Good morning, students. We have finished with the poems, and I hope you are getting sufficient time to do your work. You have to complete writing the question answers in your workbook. Take your time, but try to do it. If you don't do, you will be getting loaded with work. We shall move on with our studies. We begin now with the short story. We have another 4 more lessons in the short story, and today we shall deal with the story titled The Little Match Girl. Little Match Girl is a story written by Hans Christian Andersen. Hans Christian Andersen was born in Denmark in 1805. He has written many stories and poems and a well-known writer. We have a story written by Hans Christian Andersen here titled The Little Match Girl. The Little Match Girl is a pathetic story of a poor little girl that touches the heart of the readers. The story begins in a cold winter night in which the snow never stopped. In this story, Andersen depicts the unfortunate fate of a little girl who is poor and miserable and going through difficult times. It is a pathetic story that touches the hearts of the readers. It revolves around a small poor little girl who is trying to sell matches and earn money because she is ordered to do so by her strict father. So we have the story here, The Little Match Girl. It was a New Year's Eve and dreadfully cold. In this cold and darkness, there went a girl, poor little one, bareheaded and with naked feet. She was trying to sell matches in order to earn money because she was ordered to do so by her strict father. She knew if she did not sell matches and earn money, she would get beating from her father. So she tried hard to sell matches. And then she finds it difficult. She failed to do so. She crept along, trembling with cold and hunger. She felt miserable. The flakes of snow covered her long hair. Lights shone from every window, and she could smell the delicious smell of roast goose being cooked for New Year's Eve in the houses. She could not stop thinking about it. In a corner between two houses, she sat down. Her little hands were almost numb and cold. She thought that a match might warm her fingers if she lit it. So she lit the match and then felt comfortable. Since she found it comfortable and she knew if she goes home without selling the matches, her father would certainly not be pleased. He could be sure to beat her. Besides, it was cold enough at home, as they had only a roof above them that was full of holes. So she sat there and lit a matchstick. Her little hands were almost numb with the cold. She thought that a match might warm her fingers. She drew out one and struck it. It blazed and burned and gave out a warm, bright flame like a little candle as she held her hand over it. It was a wonderful light. It really seemed to be to the girl as if she sat in front of a great iron stove with a lovely fire inside it. It burned so nicely that the little girl stretched out her feet to warm them. She felt very comfortable. But then the flame went out. The stove vanished, and nothing remained. She had only the remains of the burned out match in her hand. So the first match that she lifts gives her the experience of sitting near a burning stove which warmed her up. Then she lights another matchstick. It burned brightly, and where the light fell on the wall, she could suddenly see into the room. A snow white cloth was spread on the table, on which were laid beautiful china plates, while a stuffed roast goose cooked away and made a most delicious smell. And what was more delightful and wonderful, the goose jumped from the dish with a knife and fork still in its breast, and waddled along the floor straight towards the little girl. But the match went out, and then nothing was left to hear but the thick, damp wall. Look at the first stick that she lit gave her warmth. The second stick that she lit, she felt as if the goose that is sitting in the next house was coming towards her. This is the dream of the girl, the feeling of the girl, the desire of the girl that is shown. So next we see she did not give up. When that stick was burned out, she lit another one. She lit another match and found herself sitting under the most magnificent Christmas tree. Thousands of candles were burning on the green branches and little painted figures, like she had seen in shop windows. She stretched out her hand to them, but then the match went out. Still, the light of the Christmas tree burned higher and higher into sky until she saw one fall, forming a long trail of fire. So let's look at the experience of the girl. Here we have third matchstick giving her an experience of a Christmas night with a beautiful Christmas tree. Now she sees someone is dying, said the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only one who had ever been good to her, but who was now dead. Now she feels whenever a star falls, a soul goes up to God. That was the teaching that was given to her. So she is having a pleasant dream of her grandmother. When the Christmas tree vanished, she struck another matchstick. It lit, and in its brightness, her dear old grandmother appeared before her, beaming love and kindness. She cried loudly, calling Granny, "Take me too with you. I know you will disappear when the match is burned out." That was her experience the last 3 times. So she called her loudly. You will also vanish like another things like a stove, the roast goose, and the glorious Christmas tree. So the girl felt that if the matchstick dies off, her grandmother also may vanish. And she rubbed the whole bundle of matches quickly against the wall, for she wanted to keep her grandmother near her. They burned with such brilliant light that it became brighter than the midday sun. Her grandmother had never looked so grand and beautiful. She took the little girl in her arms, and both flew joyfully together, climbing higher far off above the earth, away from the cold and hunger, to heaven. Then the writer says, and the next morning she was found frozen with a smile on her face. The people noticed her lying covered with snowflakes, dead. She had died on the last evening of the cold year, the night before the new year. No one imagined what beautiful things she had seen or how happily she had gone with her grandmother. So we see the story is completely revolving around this little poor girl Therefore, the little match girl is a poor, uh, is really a apt title that could be given. The story is set in the streets of a town. It begins on a cold winter night in which the snow never stops. So here we see Hans Christian Andersen trying to bring out the pathetic condition of the poor. Here, Hans has an experience of the suffering humanity, and then he gives how the poor struggle to live on. So we see the story revolving around a poor little match girl who walks in the street barefooted. She carried a large quantity of matches, and then she was barefooted. Snow covered her long hair. She sat down in a corner between two houses and dreamt of the iron stove, the Christmas tree, the goose, and then at the end her grandmother who came with lots of love and kindness. And then the story ends with the death of the little girl, found her on the street covered with snowflakes by the people. So here we have the story, poor little match girl. We shall see to the explanation of the story. Let us see the beginning of the story. So let us see. It was bitterly cold. Snow was falling and darkness was gathering. For it was the last evening of the old year. It was New Year's Eve. So here we have the explanation that it was the last evening of the old year. It was New Year's Eve. That means it is the last day of the year, and the next day it will be a new year. So we know New Year Eve, how people go on preparing, how people make preparations in order to welcome a new year. In the midst of hush and bush, we have here a little girl who is struggling, and then it was a bitterly cold night. So we have the next paragraph. In the old and gloom, a poor little girl walked bareheaded and barefoot through the streets. So we have in the cold and gloom, a poor little girl walked. So in this cold, dark night, a poor little girl, dark evening, it's not night, it's an evening. The poor girl is walking through the streets bareheaded. That means in the winter season, we find in foreign countries people covering their head with some scarf or some warm cloth. So here we have this girl bareheaded. She has nothing to cover her head. And barefoot, what does that mean? In this winter, people usually wear socks and boots and shoes. So here the little girl is without even a slipper, barefoot, without a socks. She is walking on the street. She had been wearing slippers, it is true. Earlier she had a slipper with her, but that was true. But when she left home, it was only when she left home. But what good were they? So it was not good. What good were they? It's a question. Meaning to say, the slippers she was wearing was not good enough. Why? They had been her mother's. Why it was not good enough? Because it was her mother's slippers. So you can imagine how big they were. So the little match girl could not cope up with the big slipper that she was wearing when she got out of the house. That is why the writer says how good they were. So we saw the little girl walking on the street barefoot and bareheaded. So let's see forward. The little girl had lost them. Here, lost them means the slippers. How she lost them? As she ran across the street to escape from two carriages that were being driven terribly fast. So, when she was on the street, she saw two carriages coming so soon. In order to escape from them, she was running so fast. Then, what happened? One slipper could not be found, and a boy had run off with the other. So, look at the tragedy of the child. One slipper could not be found. So, in this snowflaked road, if she was running so fast, it might have either drowned in that flakes of snow, or she must have lost them. And then she was not even able to look for that lost one because the other one was taken by a boy, saying that it would come in in very handy as a cradle some day when he had children of his own. So look at the humorist way the writer is writing. So what does he say when he carries that slipper? He says it would come in very handy as a cradle. What is a cradle? A cradle is a place we make children, babies, to sleep, or is a place where babies are comfortably placed, the cradle. So here he is telling this slipper would be a cradle for whom? When he had children of his own. That boy, when he has children of his own, it will be handy or good for him. And then the child, the poor little girl, loses both the slippers. So here we have a we have the story, the poor little match girl. We shall go forward in the next session. I hope you have understood the story. Once you understand the story, it's easy to understand the paragraphs as I explained. Next time when you come, when you sit with the book, I prefer you just go through the story in detail. It will help you to understand me better. So till we come with the next class, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.